Every December, my family went to Aspen. The tradition started when my father's consulting firm had a good year and decided success should look a certain way: ski slopes, polished wood lodges, group photos where everyone wore expensive jackets. The trips continued long after that first year, even when the enthusiasm faded. For my parents and my younger brother Daniel, Aspen was proof of something: status, accomplishment, the idea that our family had moved beyond the lives our grandparents lived. For me, the trips felt more like a performance. I went every year anyway, partly out of habit, partly because absence would have started a different kind of conversation. The lodge that year was larger than usual, perched halfway up the mountain with wide windows facing the slopes. Snow fell steadily when we arrived, quiet and constant. Inside, the place smelled faintly of cedar and fireplace smoke. Everyone carried bags upstairs, calling out room assignments. Daniel reached the hallway first. He glanced into one of the smaller rooms near the back of the house. A narrow space that looked more like it had once been a storage area. He tossed my suitcase inside. "You'll stay in this one," he said. Then he looked me over with a faint smile. "Matches your factory worker look better." A couple of cousins chuckled. My mother gave the same laugh she used whenever Daniel said something slightly cruel, but technically framed as humor. My father leaned against the railing. "Without us," he said, "you wouldn't even set foot in Aspen." No one waited for my response. They moved on to discussing dinner reservations. I stepped into the small room and closed the door. I had worked in a factory for almost 15 years. In my family's vocabulary, that word meant something specific: the place people ended up when they hadn't aimed high enough. It never mattered that I'd chosen the job deliberately, or that after a few years, I stopped just working there and started paying attention to suppliers, logistics, the way contracts move through different companies. Factories are strange places that way. If you stay long enough, you begin to see how entire industries quietly depend on them. Eventually, I invested in a small machining operation with 2 partners. Then another. Then a supplier company that most people outside manufacturing had never heard of. The family never asked much about it. Still at the factory was usually enough for them. So I kept the answers simple. The first few days of the trip followed the usual rhythm: skiing during the day, expensive dinners at night. Daniel talked about venture capital deals he barely understood. My parents compared resorts with friends on the phone. Occasionally someone asked me a polite question about work. "Busy this year?" "Same as always," something like that. It seemed to satisfy everyone. On the third morning, someone knocked at the front door while we were eating breakfast. A man in a dark coat stepped inside, brushing snow from his shoulders. He introduced himself as the property manager. There had been a mix-up with documentation tied to the house. Apparently the lodge had recently changed ownership through a regional property investment group, and some reservation records hadn't been updated correctly. My father stood to greet him, already speaking in the confident tone he used with service staff. "We rented this place months ago." The manager nodded politely. "Yes, the reservation is still valid. I just needed to confirm a few details with the new ownership group." He opened a folder and glanced down. Then he looked up again. His eyes landed on me. There was a small pause. "Or Mr. Carter," he said. I nodded. He stepped closer. "I didn't realize you were staying here this week. The renovation proposal we discussed last month is moving forward, and I wanted to confirm the schedule." The room went quiet. My brother set down his coffee mug slowly. My father's expression shifted just slightly. The manager continued speaking in the calm, professional tone people use when discussing business. "The board approved your company's recommendation for the new lift maintenance system. We're finalizing contracts with your manufacturing partner next week." He waited for my response. I answered a few practical questions. Yes, the installation timeline still worked. Yes, our supplier could meet the winter schedule. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes, then the manager thanked me and left. For a while no one spoke. Daniel finally leaned back in his chair. "You own part of the company that bought this place?" he asked. "Part of the group," I said. My mother looked toward the window. "You never mentioned that." I shrugged. "You never asked." The rest of breakfast felt strangely careful. No one joked about the factory. Daniel asked a few questions about the investment group. My father mostly stayed quiet. Later that afternoon, while the others were out skiing, I walked the edge of the property alone. Snow covered everything in a thick white layer that softened the landscape. The mountains stretched out in every direction. From a distance, the lodge looked like a picture from a magazine. Inside, nothing dramatic had happened. No arguments. No apologies. Just a small adjustment in how people looked at me. That evening we gathered for dinner again. The conversations were calmer this time. Someone asked if I'd like to move into one of the larger rooms, now that a cousin had left early. I shook my head. "This one's fine." And it was, not because the room had changed, but because something else had. For years I had believed the quiet insults mattered more than they actually did. Standing there in that small room, I realized something simple. My dignity had never depended on whether my family understood my life. It only depended on whether I understood it myself. Outside, snow kept falling across the mountains. Inside, the house grew quiet, and for the first time during one of those Aspen trips, I slept well.